You're listening to Night Signals, broadcasting across the cold miles between us. This is Cliff Reynolds. Tonight's guest is a scientist, someone trained not to believe in folklore, not to entertain the unexplained. But when he ventured too far into the Yukon ice fields, he found something, or rather something found him. The glaciers are melting, and in their retreat they may be revealing more than just ancient fossils. Tonight, we bring you a voice that doesn't usually speak on radio. Someone who only agreed to this interview under a false name and a private uplink. He calls himself Dr. Everett, and he was a field climatologist embedded in a months-long solo monitoring program north of Destruction Bay. What he saw, and more importantly, what saw him, changed his understanding of what the wilderness keeps hidden. Dr. Everett, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Cliff. I've listened to your program for years, always quietly, always with a kind of detached curiosity. But after what happened up there, I needed to speak about it, if only to hear someone else say it out loud.
You were stationed at one of the glacier outpost labs in the Yukon. Let's start there. What exactly were you doing up there?
The assignment was straightforward. I was collecting longitudinal melt rate data from 3 specific glacier termini feeding into the Donjak River Basin. I'd rotate between a main cabin, really just a converted shipping container with insulation, and 2 remote data relays further into the ice field. The melt rates were spiking due to unusual summer temperatures. Some of the deeper cores were uncovering long sealed cavities, air pockets that hadn't touched the open atmosphere for thousands of years. That was expected. What wasn't expected was the feeling, the silence.
The feeling?
It began on the 4th week. I'd be out collecting samples, usually alone, and I started sensing presence, like being observed. Not by a person, not in a casual way. This was ancient, deliberate. The way a predator watches something for a very long time before it moves.
Any animals in the area? Bears? Wolves?
Plenty of wolves, yes. A few bear tracks. But this wasn't that. This thing didn't make noise. It didn't leave tracks. Not at first. It just watched. Every day. I'd glance up from a crevasse wall or my seismograph logs and just... no. You know that feeling, Cliff, when your body knows it's not alone before your mind does?
Oh, I've known that feeling plenty. What happened next?
On day 33, I saw it. Across the crevasse from the far relay station, standing on a granite outcrop, half shaded in glacier fog. Massive, 8, maybe 9 feet tall. Black hair, still as a cairn. I don't even know how long it had been there before I noticed it. But I froze. I've faced down moose and rut. I've had polar bears sniffing at tents. Nothing paralyzes like this did.
Was it moving?
That's what was so strange. No movement, no sound. And I swear to you, the mist around it didn't drift the way it should. It was like it warped the air around itself. I wanted to take a photo, but my hand wouldn't move. The moment passed when a wind gust swept through and broke the line of sight. When I looked again, it was gone.
Did you try to rationalize it?
Of course, fatigue, hypoxia, ice reflections, but I checked my oxygen levels, checked my hydration. Everything was normal, except me.
What made you come forward now?
Because it kept coming back every day after that. Same spot, same posture. It never approached, never showed aggression. It was just there, watching, always at a distance. And the strangest part, Cliff, I started to expect it.
Expect it?
I'd finish my field logs early just so I could hike up and look across the crevasse. And there it would be, waiting. Not like an animal, not even like a ghost. It felt like a sentinel, like it was assigned to me.
A guardian?
Exactly, but not of me. Of the glacier, of the ice, of something inside it maybe. Something it didn't want me, or anyone else, getting too close to.
We'll pick it up right there after the break. Stay with us, folks. Tonight on Night Signals, a voice from the edge of the melt and from the edge of belief. We're back with Dr. Everett, a climatologist who spent a long, isolated season monitoring glacial melt in the Yukon. But something else was watching him, something tall, silent, and always in the same place. Doctor, before the break, you said it didn't feel like this being was watching you exactly, but rather guarding something deeper in the glacier. What led you to that conclusion?
It was subtle at first. On the surface, it just seemed to be observing, but the pattern became too specific. The times it appeared always coincided with the days I was planning to collect samples near certain crevasse systems, especially a particular one I had marked as anomalous in the melt maps. The ice around it was thinning unusually fast, revealing what looked like a hollow void far below the surface.
A cave?
A chamber? Smooth walls? Too symmetrical. I'd only glimpsed it once through the borecam. The footage was corrupted the next day, though I had already seen enough to know this wasn't a natural cavity.
And the being, the guardian, only appeared when you approached that zone?
Exactly. I ran tests. I intentionally planned a trip toward a different section, and nothing showed up. No shadow, no presence. But every time I turned back toward that crevasse, it was there. Same stance, same position, as if it was warning me, or maybe studying how I reacted.
Were you ever tempted to get closer to it, to cross the crevasse?
I considered it, but that would have meant leaving my equipment behind, hiking unstable terrain, and, truthfully, disobeying every instinct I had. It didn't give off aggression, but there was a weight to its gaze, like it was telling me, do not come closer, not threatening, but commanding.
Describe its appearance in more detail if you can.
Massive, not just tall, but dense. Its frame was like packed muscle, but with a coat of black hair that seemed to absorb light. There was no shine, no reflection. Its face was partially obscured, but I remember the eyes. Not glowing, not animal, just deeply aware. There was intelligence there, not curiosity, intention.
Some would say you were hallucinating, that the isolation, the cold, even the altitude might have played tricks on you.
Believe me, I considered all that. I kept a meticulous log of my vitals. I even recorded my own cognitive assessments daily. Memory, reaction time, clarity, everything remained stable, and I wasn't seeing ghosts in tree trunks. This thing had mass, presence. It altered wind patterns. Even birds avoided the area when it was there.
You mentioned corrupted footage. Did any recordings survive?
One, a thermal image. But even that was warped. The figure showed up as a cold silhouette, which is impossible. Warm-blooded mammals give off heat, especially something that size. But this was negative, like it wasn't emitting energy as it was absorbing it.
That's fascinating, almost like a thermal void.
Exactly. And it was the only time I've ever seen a shadow in thermal footage. Shadows aren't heat-based, but there it was, casting something colder than the ice itself.
Did you report any of this to your superiors?
I filed standard logs, but I left out the encounters. The last thing a scientist wants is to be flagged for psychological review. My final report focused only on the abnormal melt patterns and the unknown cavity. I submitted it, packed my gear, and left.
But the story doesn't end there, does it?
It followed me home. Not literally, but in dreams. In a way I can't explain.
Hold on to that thought. When we return, Dr. Everett tells us what came next and why some secrets stay buried in the ice for a reason. Stay with us. This is Night Signals. We're back. If you're just tuning in, our guest tonight is Dr. Everett, a climatologist who encountered a silent, towering presence while studying glacial melt in the Yukon, a presence that appeared only when he approached a mysterious ice chamber and which left behind no tracks, no heat, and only memory. Dr. Everett, before the break, you said something followed you home, not physically, in dreams. Tell us about that.
The first night I returned to civilization, I stayed at a lodge near Whitehorse just to decompress. Standard routine. But my sleep was fragmented. Not in the way stress disrupts rest. This was structured. like a broadcast being received. I dreamt I was back on the ice, standing on the edge of that crevasse, staring across to that same granite outcrop. Except this time, there were dozens of them.
Dozens.
Lined along the ridges, silhouettes of massive figures, each spaced evenly apart, facing the cavity. None looked at me. It was like they were holding vigil, not for me, not for any human, but for something underneath, something that hadn't moved yet, something asleep.
And you kept having these dreams?
Every night for a week. They evolved. In one, the ice cracked. In another, they began to hum, low, resonant, like the glaciers themselves were groaning in sympathy. And then came the last one. In that dream, they turned to look at me.
All of them?
At once, and I woke up drenched in sweat, but freezing. The room thermostat read 23 degrees Celsius, but I could see my breath. That's when I knew this wasn't just subconscious debris. Something had imprinted itself on me, not an infection, a memory, as though the glacier had passed something into me when I left.
You said earlier you think the being was a guardian, not of you, but of something in the ice. What do you believe is down there?
I've asked myself that 1,000 times. The core samples showed mineral disruptions inconsistent with standard glacial formation, magnetic anomalies. There were even trace readings of structured carbon, impossible geometries, hexagonal formations that shouldn't exist in nature. But what really stood out was the silence.
Silence.
Seismographs measure the hum of the earth. Glaciers groan, wind flows. But near that cavity, the sensors flatlined. No vibration, no resonance. It was as though that pocket of earth was disconnected, not just geologically, but from reality. Like a blind spot, something outside the map.
What could cause that?
I don't know. But I suspect that cavity wasn't made by ice movement. It was carved, not by tools, by something else, something with intent. And that being, the one I saw every day, it was waiting for me to understand that, but not to invite me in, to make sure I stayed out.
Do you think others have seen it?
Not many. But I've spoken quietly to a few other field scientists. They don't say it outright, but they hint. Shadows they can't explain. Missing time during measurements, instruments behaving erratically. One even told me in hushed tones that sometimes they hear footsteps, but not on snow, on stone, beneath the ice.
Stone beneath the ice.
As if the glacier is just a skin, a thin veil over something older, something that was sealed there before we had a word for time. And now the veil is melting.
You said something else once, off air before we started recording, that maybe Bigfoot isn't what we think it is.
I used to think Bigfoot was a relic species, an undiscovered primate, but what I saw, it wasn't just an animal. It didn't blink. It didn't breathe. It stood in place for hours in sub-zero temperatures without moving a muscle. And when it vanished, there was never any trace, not even a thermal shadow.
So if it's not an animal,
then maybe it's a function, a mechanism, a biological lock on a geological vault.
and the glacier?
Isn't melting. It's being unlocked.
When we return, Dr. Everett explains the final days of his assignment and what made him leave the field for good. This is Night Signals. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Night Signals. Our guest tonight is Dr. Everett, a climatologist who's just described a series of chilling encounters during a solo glacial survey in the Yukon. A figure, massive, silent, and ever-present, appeared each day near a mysterious melt cavity in the ice. But this wasn't an animal. It didn't behave like one. It didn't move like one. And it didn't leave the doctor's mind even after he returned home. Doctor, take us back to your final days in the field. You said things began to escalate. What do you mean by that?
I stayed longer than I should have. Originally, the plan was to wrap up on day 40, but something about that crevasse, that chamber in the ice, it had a pull, A silent invitation to observe but not enter, and I admit I became obsessed. Every evening I'd climb a ridge with my thermal scope and wait, and every evening it would be there, watching. But on day 43, it wasn't.
It vanished?
Yes, no silhouette, no presence, just absence. The forest didn't react, the wind didn't shift. It was like that entire edge of the landscape had been erased. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange freedom. Or maybe it was temptation.
What did you do?
I crossed. I climbed down into the crevasse, something I had sworn not to do. But the silence had become unbearable. I needed to know. I left my recorder running at base camp and descended. It took nearly 2 hours to reach the threshold of that cavity. The walls were smooth, Cliff, not eroded, polished. And the entrance, it wasn't natural. It was perfectly arched.
You said earlier it was a geological impossibility.
It was like stepping to the mouth of a cathedral, one made not by man but by pressure, intelligence, and time beyond counting. The air coming from within wasn't cold. It was still. No movement, no scent, just quiet. But in that quiet, I began to hear something. Not a sound, but a thought, a pressure, like a single word repeating behind my eyes. Leave.
You were hearing it?
I was thinking it, but it wasn't mine. That's the only way I can describe it. As if something behind the ice was aware of my proximity and had decided to speak through thought alone. Not yelling, not threatening, but warning.
Did you enter the chamber?
I didn't need to. Just standing at the threshold, I felt it. This was not a cave. It was containment. Whatever was inside, it had been buried deliberately, locked beneath centuries of glacial silence. And now, the lock was weakening.
You think the figure, the guardian, had stepped away on purpose?
Yes, I believe it was a test, or a moment of decision, that it had been placed there to prevent human interference, but also to observe how we react to the lure of the unknown. When I stepped into that crevasse, I failed the test.
What happened next?
As I turned back to climb out, the ground beneath me cracked. Not enough to fall, but enough to freeze my spine. And just above me, on the ridge, it was back. The guardian. This time closer. 15 feet away, staring down. Its presence was overwhelming. I dropped to one knee without meaning to. Not out of fear, but because I couldn't stand upright. My body wouldn't allow it.
And then?
It turned, slowly, and walked back into the mist. That was the last time I saw it. I packed my gear that night. I left all secondary equipment behind. I knew deep down if I stayed even one more day, I wouldn't be allowed to leave.
You think it let you go?
I know it did, not because I posed a threat, but because I understood some things are meant to remain buried, not because they're forgotten, but because they remember.
Coming up after the break, what happened to the final glacier scan data and why Dr. Everett believes we're approaching a threshold humanity isn't ready for. Stay with us. You're listening to Night Signals. Welcome back to Night Signals. I'm Cliff Reynolds, and if you've been with us tonight, you've heard the unfolding testimony of Dr. Everett, a climatologist stationed deep in the Yukon ice fields who encountered something not animal, not quite human, and not alone. Before the break, Dr. Everett recounted standing at the edge of a massive, unnatural cavity beneath the glacier, a chamber too symmetrical, too silent, and too wrong to be natural. A figure, tall, black-haired, and ancient in its presence, had watched him for weeks. Then, just once, it disappeared, allowing him to step too close. He believes he was tested and that he failed. Doctor, you said you left most of your equipment behind, but did you take anything with you? Any data? Recordings?
Yes. I uploaded a partial set of melt rate scans, time-lapse captures, and subglacial resonance data to a private cloud backup before I left the field. But when I tried to access the files 2 days later, they were gone.
Gone?
Not deleted, rewritten. The file names remained, but the contents had been replaced with blank image matrices, just uniform white pixels, as if overwritten by digital noise. But one file didn't vanish, a low-frequency seismic file from the day after I approached the cavity.
What was in it?
A hum. A slow, repeating pulse that wasn't present in any previous recordings. It had a rhythm, not natural, not tectonic. It pulsed in 3-beat intervals, over and over. And every fifth interval, the pitch dropped slightly, almost imperceptibly. But it was there.
Did you analyze it?
I sent it to a former colleague who specializes in deep earth resonance studies. He ran it through pattern recognition software, said it resembled a language more than a geological anomaly, structured pulses too ordered to be coincidence, and the timing of its appearance, immediately after my proximity to the cavity, was too perfect to dismiss.
What do you think it means?
I think something beneath the glacier registered my presence. I think it stirred, not woke up, not fully, but shifted. The hum is a signal, a slow calibration, as if it were checking the edges of its cage.
You said earlier the Guardian felt like a lock, a biological key left behind to monitor or guard whatever's down there. But this hum, it implies a second presence.
Exactly. The Guardian isn't alone. It's part of a system, like white blood cells guarding a wound. But the wound isn't healing anymore. It's reopening.
Do you think the glacier was placed there on purpose?
Yes. I believe the glacier wasn't just a result of climate. It was part of a seal. Not to keep something out, but to keep something in. And as it melts, naturally or otherwise, that containment is failing.
Have you told anyone else? Other researchers?
A few, quietly, off the record. Most think I've been in the cold too long. One of them, though, a Swiss glaciologist, sent me a note back. Just 3 words. We see it. No follow-up. His university said he's on extended leave. No forwarding address.
So this isn't isolated.
These anomalies are appearing in multiple cryospheres. The Karakoram, East Antarctica, the Southern Andes. Glacial melt is revealing more than rock. It's revealing structure, shape, design.
You're implying intelligence?
I'm not implying it. I'm stating it outright. These aren't caves. They're systems. And the beings we call Bigfoot, they aren't random forest primates. They're interfaces, guardians, biological custodians. Their purpose isn't interaction, it's control.
Control of what?
Something older than human memory, something we're not supposed to find. And now that we're seeing it, hearing it, even dreaming of it, it's beginning to see us too.
Coming up next, Doctor, Everett shares why he believes these glacier guardians are not native to Earth and why they may be responding to a planetary signal older than human civilization. This is Night Signals. Stay with us. This is Night Signals. I'm Cliff Reynolds, and tonight we're hearing from Dr. Everett, a climatologist who encountered a towering presence while conducting solo glacial research in the Yukon. But what began as a silent observer quickly revealed itself as something far more deliberate, something old, something watching over a hidden structure beneath the melting ice. Doctor, just before the break, you said it plainly. This being, what many might call a Bigfoot, is not simply a relic creature. You said it was an interface, that its purpose is control. Let's go further. You said it isn't native to Earth.
That's correct. And I don't say it lightly. I've spent my entire career grounded in empirical science. But there's a point where the data, the patterns, and the phenomena all converge into something no longer explainable by biology or geology alone.
What convinced you?
Several things. The first was its consistency. Every time it appeared, it returned to the exact same location, no deviation, like a machine operating within programmed bounds. The second was its lack of heat signature, not low but negative. It didn't just exist in the cold, it exerted cold, as if operating on principles that negate entropy. But the real moment, the one that ended my denial, came days after I left the site. I was reviewing old satellite data, pulling historical glacial overlays for comparison, and I noticed something that shouldn't have been there.
Go on.
In a 1982 reconnaissance satellite image, grainy, black and white, there's a faint mark on that same granite outcrop, same coordinates, a vertical shadow, 9 feet tall, identical proportions. It was already there, decades ago, unmoved. Same spot I saw it in.
So it's not just ancient, it's persistent.
That's what disturbed me, that it didn't arrive in the last few years. It's always been there, quiet, patient, waiting for someone to get too close.
Have you considered that it might not be biological at all?
I have, and I believe it's a blend, something post-biological. Imagine a machine grown in flesh, a consciousness embedded in organic camouflage. Its hair, its skin, its eyes, they may look mammalian, but they function differently, purpose-built for Earth's wilderness, but not born of it.
You think it was placed here?
I do, and not just it. I believe there are many. I believe they were seeded across key locations, all tied to deep Earth vaults. Antarctica, northern Russia, the Canadian Shield. They're placed where something was hidden, sealed, monitored.
And what's inside these vaults?
I can only speculate, but based on what I felt near that cavity, and I use that word deliberately, felt, it isn't technology in the way we understand it. It's pressure, intention, something buried not just physically, but temporally, as if it's sleeping in a way that requires not time, but isolation from time.
You mentioned a signal, something older than human civilization. Can you explain that?
There's a theory in climatology about Earth's long rhythms, Milankovitch cycles, solar variation, geomagnetic fluctuations. But in the last 2 decades, certain background frequencies have been registering beneath the noise floor of our instruments, pulses that don't match any known terrestrial process. When you overlay the pulse intervals with glacier melt accelerations at remote sites, there's a terrifying correlation. It's as if the planet itself is responding to something, or something beneath it is responding to a signal from elsewhere.
Extraterrestrial?
Or extratemporal, or extra-dimensional. I don't know. But the beings guarding these vaults, I believe they aren't just watching us. They're listening, waiting for a threshold, a command.
And if that command is given,
then the locks disengage, the glacier melts, and what's buried begins to rise.
Still ahead, Doctor, Everett shares details of a suppressed joint research operation and the strange letter that arrived 6 months later, a letter he was never meant to see. Stay tuned. This is Night Signals. You're listening to Night Signals, and tonight's transmission has taken us deep into the Yukon wilderness, beneath ancient ice, and into the mind of Dr. Everett, a climatologist whose solo expedition uncovered something impossible. Not an animal, not a myth, but a silent sentinel guarding a glacial chamber that should not exist. Doctor, before the break, you mentioned a letter. A communication that arrived months after your return. You said it was never meant to reach you. Tell us what happened.
It arrived 6 months to the day after I left the field. I was in Vancouver trying to reintegrate, teaching quietly. A brown envelope came to my campus mailbox. No return address, no postmark. Inside was a photocopy of a report marked Joint Tasking Directive, Level 5 clearance only. The title, Operation Cold Veil. It included coordinates, my coordinates.
The exact location of the crevasse?
Yes, along with satellite telemetry records, topographical overlays, and something that made my blood run cold, a schedule, a set of projected melt dates paired with seismic scan intervals. The final date listed was circled in red ink, July 18th. No year, just the date.
And this was after you had already left?
Correct. And it indicated that the Canadian government, along with 2 unnamed international agencies, had scheduled something at the site, a test, a controlled penetration event. They weren't just studying it, Cliff. They were planning to open it.
What happened next?
I contacted the only colleague I trusted, someone who had access to military-grade satellite archives. I asked him to check activity at the site around that date. After 2 weeks, he called me back. His voice was different, flat, mechanical. He said, "You didn't hear this from me, but the footage is gone. The satellite feed shows static for 72 hours. After that, the ice shelf was completely collapsed,
Collapsed?
as if something pushed up from underneath, like the ground exhaled. But there was no debris, no expedition logs, no official record. When I tried to access the public glacier database that week, the region's records were under revision,
Erased?
rewritten, sanitized. The site was sealed off with a vague ecological restoration notice. But I kept digging. Through archived academic logs, I found a name I recognized, a glacial hydrologist who had been tangentially assigned to the region. I reached out. No reply. 2 weeks later, I received a single message from an unlisted number. It said, "Stop tracing what has always been in place."
That's cryptic.
Number, it was surgical, deliberate. Whoever sent that knew exactly what I was doing, and they knew how close I was to connecting the final dots.
What were those dots?
That these beings, these sentinels, are not isolated phenomena. They form a network, a containment system, not just across Canada, but the planet. Their purpose isn't to evade human detection. It's to maintain stasis over something not human, not alive, and not dead. Something that sleeps beneath us, not beneath cities, beneath wilderness, where no one should find it. Until now.
You believe the melt is being accelerated?
Yes, either by the planet or by an intelligence external to it. But here's the most disturbing part. That cavity beneath the glacier, I now believe it was not the vault. I believe it was the keyhole.
And the glacier itself?
Was the lock.
We'll be back after the break. When we return, Dr. Everett reveals the final sign he received, a signal intercepted on a shortwave frequency never meant for public ears, one that changed everything. You're listening to Night Signals. This is Night Signals, and we've come to the final hour of a journey that has taken us beyond folklore, past the boundaries of accepted science, and into the ice-veiled unknown. With us is Dr. Everett, a climatologist who, during a solo assignment in the Yukon, encountered a towering figure watching over a glacial chamber, a being not native to Earth, a sentinel, a lock. And now, as we reach the final chapter of his story, we come to the signal. Doctor, tell us what happened.
It was a month after the anonymous letter. I was sleeping poorly, plagued by recurring dreams of that chamber, of the figures on the ridge, their eyes not glowing, but lit from within. One night, I was scanning low-frequency shortwave bands on an old field radio I kept in my study. It was something I did often, a kind of coping ritual. I'd sweep through static, listen to ghost stations, coded number loops, Soviet bleed over, nothing new. But then, just after 3 a.m., I caught something.
What did you hear?
A deep pulse, repeating. Not a signal from any known beacon, no identifiers, just a rhythmic thrum like a subsonic breath. And underneath it, faint but structured, was speech.
In what language?
Not one I recognized, not even one I could imitate. But it had cadence, pattern. It didn't sound like a broadcast. It sounded like a chant. And then it stopped, abruptly, as if it noticed I was listening.
Could it have been a coincidence, a misfire from a nearby base?
That's what I told myself. Until I checked the frequency again the next night, nothing, clean static. But when I powered off the radio, my laptop, which had been asleep, woke up. On its screen, a line of text had been typed into a blank document.
What did it say?
The lock is melting. The Guardians remember. Do you?
You're saying this was some kind of contact.
A warning, or a provocation. It knew I had crossed the threshold, that I had seen too much. And now, I believe others are being marked the same way. Quietly, in dreams, in data, in sightings passed off as folklore. It's watching us now as we watched it then.
What do you believe will happen next?
The melt will continue, not because of us, but because it must. The pressure beneath the ice is building. The Guardians were placed here to monitor the seal, and I believe that whatever lies beneath, it no longer sleeps.
And humanity?
We're not the architects. We're not the wardens. We're the intruders. And I fear we've already knocked too hard on a door that was never meant to open.
Final question before we go to the phones, Doctor. If someone out there is listening tonight, someone camped out near the edge of a glacier, hearing sounds in the dark, feeling eyes where there should be none, what would you say to them?
Stop. Turn around. The wilderness does not welcome you. The silence is not empty. And the thing in the distance? It sees you.
Okay, this is so fascinating, and I'm sure our listeners have questions. So in our next segment, we'll go to the phones. So hold tight. I'm Cliff Reynolds, and you're listening to Night Signals. You're listening to Night Signals, and tonight, I think we've all crossed a boundary. We've spent the last 3 hours walking beside a man who stood face to face or ridge to ridge with something the textbooks don't prepare you for. Dr. Everett's experience in the Yukon ice fields has left many of us, myself included, rethinking what we thought we knew about the wilderness, about the earth, and about what waits beneath it. Now, the phone lines are jammed, the inbox is flooding, and the airwaves feel heavy. So we're going to take some of your calls and some of your written messages live, because tonight you deserve to be heard. And Dr. Everett, who is still with us, has agreed to stay on the line for the next hour to respond. Let's go to line 1. Andrea from Sitka, Alaska. You're live on Night Signals.
Hi, Cliff and Dr. Everett. I just want to say thank you. I work in search and rescue up here on Baranof Island. I've heard the screams, the long ones, the ones that aren't bears. We don't talk about it on record, but last fall we found a campsite with fresh coals, no people, and the weirdest part, no prints, nothing leaving or arriving, but there was this moss, peeled back, like something had moved through the clearing without ever touching the ground.
Andrea, I believe you, and I think you're describing the same presence I encountered, or at least a related one. The ground often shows no compression, but the vegetation, the patterns of shift, they ripple outward, like it disturbs the living system around it but doesn't leave mechanical traces, as though it's displaced or meant to pass undetected by anything born of this world.
Andrea, thank you for your courage. You're not alone. Let's try line 2. Caller 2, Jared in Bellingham, Washington.
Hey, Cliff, longtime listener. I've got a home-built ham rig, and I was scanning around 2:40 a.m. 2 nights ago. Picked up a slow pulse, like a heartbeat, but electronic. Then this low breath came through, deep and ragged, like something breathing through the dirt. I thought it was just bleed over until I heard your show tonight. Now I'm not so sure.
Jared, that breathing. I heard it too, on my field radio. Same time, same cadence. I ran it through a spectrogram. There was no carrier wave, no modulation. It shouldn't have been there. And yet, it came through anyway. That signal wasn't trying to broadcast, it was remembering.
Let's go to a text message now, this one from S.E. in Alberta. Dr. Everett, do you think these guardians are a natural defense system, like immune cells, activated when the Earth's deeper systems are disturbed?
Yes, S.E., that's exactly what I've come to believe. These entities are not invasive, they're reactive. They appear when we get too close. Not to hunt us, but to hold the line. We're not meant to find what lies beneath, and when we do, the system reacts. Biologically, environmentally, perhaps even psychically. It's defense, silent, patient, effective.
You've got a way of saying these things, Doctor, that chills the bone. Let's go back to the lines. Line 4, go ahead. Caller 3, Michael in Whitehorse, Yukon.
Yeah, hi. I don't know how to say this, but I think I saw it too. Last winter, camped on a frozen lake near Cluane. There was this figure standing up on the ridge, didn't move for 3 nights. Every time I looked up from my fire, it was there, still. When I left, my compass went dead. And now I can't stop dreaming of being inside something vast and white and alive.
Michael, I know what you're describing. It's not just memory and its transmission. The place you camped, it was a threshold. These dreams aren't hallucinations. They're proximity signals. You stepped near something and it saw you, and it remembered you.
We're hearing it now. One by one, voices coming in from the dark, listeners calling from the cold edges of the map, each with a fragment, each with a piece, and we're not done. Dr. Everett has agreed to stay with us for the next segment and beyond. So if you've had a sighting, a sound, a signal, or a dream that doesn't feel like yours, call in. Write us. Coming up after the break, a woman in Montana who says her trail camera captured a silhouette with no thermal signature, and a geologist from Iceland who claims to have found identical cavities beneath a melting ice cap. The lines are open. This is Night Signals, and tonight, the ice is listening back. You're listening to Night Signals. I'm Cliff Reynolds, and tonight, something has shifted. What began as one man's testimony from a glacier in the Yukon has opened a floodgate. Calls, messages, patterns that stretch across time, across distance, across silence. Still with us is Dr. Everett, whose story has stirred something raw and real in many of you. Something maybe you didn't even know was there until tonight. Let's pick up where we left off. Line 7, you're on Night Signals. Caller 4, Miriam in Bozeman, Montana.
Hi, Cliff and Doctor. I live just south of Flathead Forest. About 3 weeks ago, my trail cam, which has thermal capture, picked up something strange. A tall figure, maybe 8 feet, standing between the trees. Only it didn't register heat. The temperature overlay showed a cold void. Not cooler, not shadowed, absent. Like it was drawing heat in. I've never seen that before.
Miriam, what you've just described matches exactly what I saw on my own equipment. These beings, guardians, watchers, whatever they are, they don't emit heat in the traditional sense. They suppress entropy. Think about that. They reduce thermal energy. That suggests a physiology or a composition not subject to decay, not fully biological.
Almost like a controlled field, as if they're wearing cold-like armor.
Or radiating a physics we don't understand.
Let's go to a message out of Reykjavik. This one from Arnie, a glacial geologist. He writes, quote, I've surveyed the Langjökull ice cap for over 20 years. In 2023, we found a chamber 30 meters down, smooth-walled, hexagonal, and somehow warmer than the surrounding ice. We sent in a drone. It failed after 27 seconds. We were told not to return. They filled it with gravel and sealed the report, unquote.
Hexagonal geometry. That's significant. I saw similar structures in subglacial sonar returns, patterns too perfect to be natural. Arnie's experience confirms what I've begun to suspect. This is a global phenomenon. Different locations, same architecture, a network, maybe a containment system or a transportation system.
The implications of that are staggering.
Not just for geology, for our entire concept of Earth's history. We might not be the first to walk these continents. We may simply be the latest to stumble into their ruins.
Let's go back to the lines. Line 5, you're live. Caleb in Missoula, Montana, go ahead.
Cliff, Dr. Everett, thanks for taking my call. I don't have hard evidence, just a recurring dream. I'm in a white corridor. Not snow, just glowing white. I'm walking toward a wall that isn't there, and behind me, there's a sound, something breathing, but it's not from lungs, it's from the floor, like the earth itself is alive and I'm stepping on its spine.
Caleb, you've touched the edge of it. That corridor, I've heard others describe it too. It appears in dreams after proximity exposure. The breathing you felt, that's resonance, subterranean, low frequency. It's not metaphor, it's data being read by the subconscious. The earth is trying to tell us something.
Doctor, do you think these dreams, these echoes, are increasing?
Yes, I believe the network is activating, not all at once, but node by node, glacier by glacier, ridge by ridge. The old places are waking, the ones we don't write about, The ones we were warned away from through myth and whisper.
And what happens when they're all awake?
Then we find out if the locks were protecting us or something else.
Coming up next, a forestry worker in British Columbia who discovered a carved stone beneath a landslide, etched with symbols that matched a glacier dream, and a call from Utah, a man who says he followed a footprint trail that ended in the middle of a frozen lake without a single crack in the ice. This is Night Signals. Stay awake. Something else is. This is Night Signals. I'm Cliff Reynolds, and we are now deep in it, past the point of no return. The phones haven't gone quiet since Dr. Everett first spoke about the guardian he encountered on a glacier in the Yukon. Since then, the stories have poured in, from the forest, from the ice, from the dark places on the edge of maps. Each voice seems to echo the same feeling. Something is waking up. Let's go to line 3. Caller 6. Tom in Revelstoke, British Columbia.
Hey Cliff, doctor. I work road maintenance for BC Parks. A few months back, we cleared a minor landslide up past Trout Lake, just shale and ice runoff. Nothing unusual, but underneath the rubble, we found a stone. Flat, about 3 feet wide, looked shaped. On the underside, there were markings, carved into it, not letters, just symbols, spirals, triangles, perfect circles. I've seen them before, in a dream I had as a kid, after getting lost in the woods overnight.
Tom, I believe you, and I think you're describing the same presence I encountered, or at least a related one. The ground often shows no compression, but the vegetation, the patterns of shift, they ripple outward, like it disturbs the living system around it but doesn't leave mechanical traces, as though it's displaced, or meant to pass undetected by anything born of this world.
And now those myths are surfacing literally as the Earth shifts.
Precisely. The ground is revealing what time once buried.
Let's go to a written message now from an anonymous listener in Utah who says, I hiked across Strawberry Reservoir in early January. Ice was thick, clear, no snow cover. I saw tracks, large, wide, with deep toe splay, barefoot, just out in the middle of the lake. They went 30 meters and then just stopped. No cracks, no hole, just vanished. I followed them, but when I reached the end, I heard a deep tone in my head, like a vibration inside my skull.
That tonal intrusion, I've experienced that as well. It may be some form of passive defense, a frequency barrier. Not sound in the air, but data pulsed into bone. It's an ancient, efficient method of communication, or deterrence. The footprint pattern is also familiar. Wide toes, deep pressure, no instep. Whatever it isn't walking with gravity. It's walking through it.
Let's go back to the phones. Line 9, caller 7, Reed, Duluth, Minnesota.
Hey, Cliff. Thanks for taking my call. Doctor, I've got more of a theory than a story. What if these beings, these guardians, aren't here to protect something in the earth, but to protect us from something we don't understand? Like, maybe the planet is one part of a larger system, a vault maybe, and we're the accidental residents living on top of it. What if the real tenant is still inside?
Reed, I've considered that. Often. It's possible we misread the function of these entities. We assume they're locking something down, but they may actually be locking us out of a system we were never meant to inhabit. That cavity in the glacier, it didn't feel like a prison. It felt like an interface, cold, silent, waiting to be reconnected. But to what? We don't know.
You've said before that the silence inside the ice wasn't natural.
Correct. The seismographs should have shown micro-vibrations, the hum of wind, pressure changes, ice shift. But in that zone, they flatlined. Total stillness. Like that area wasn't just silent, it was severed from natural time and motion. That's not environmental, that's technological, or worse, intentional.
Doctor, what happens if we don't stop, if these guardians, these locks, all melt?
Then we move from remembering to awakening. and we find out if we're the ones who disturbed the dream, or if the dream has been unfolding through us all along.
We're almost out of time tonight, but stay with us because up next, a final transmission sent from a field station before it went silent. A low, humming voice caught on a looping file, one that no one can explain, one that never ends. This is Night Signals. Don't follow the footprints. Don't follow the sound. And if the glacier begins to speak, don't answer. We're back one last time on Night Signals, and if you've made it this far, you already know. Something about tonight feels different. We've heard stories from the Yukon to Montana, Iceland to Utah, from rangers and truckers, scientists, dreamers and skeptics. And in every voice there was the same tremor, not just fear, but recognition, like remembering something we never lived, like awakening from a dream someone else had inside our heads. Before we let Dr. Everett go, there's one final piece we need to share. This comes from a station up near the Alaska-Yukon border, a research outpost that went offline in late December. No emergency call, no weather event, just silence. When officials retrieved the base equipment weeks later, they found only one file that hadn't been corrupted, a 38-second audio loop. It plays a deep, pulsating hum, slow and regular, like a breath drawn through ancient lungs. And under that hum, a voice, not human, not machine, not even speaking in a language we know, but repeating the same 3 syllables every 9 seconds. The waveform contains anomalies, frequencies outside our hearing range, modulation patterns that resemble encryption, or maybe invocation.
Dr. Everett, you've heard it.
Yes, I have. It's not a signal in the traditional sense. It's a beacon, a check-in. My theory is that it's not even meant for us. It's meant for the guardians. A kind of heartbeat from whatever lies beneath, assuring them it still lives, still waits, still remembers the surface.
And the voice?
If you isolate the background harmonics, you'll find your own name.
Excuse me?
It adapts, personalizes. That's what no one has said publicly. The voice isn't speaking to all of us. It's speaking to you.
That's all for tonight. Let me close with this. There are places on this earth we were never meant to tread, not because they are dangerous, not because they are cursed, but because they are listening. The ice is melting, the guardians are watching, and the earth, the deep earth, the dreaming earth, may soon remember that it's not alone. So the next time you walk through a forest and feel watched, the next time your radio picks up a pulse, the next time your child draws something they shouldn't know, ask yourself, is it myth, is it madness, or is it memory that rising up from the frost? You've been listening to Night Signals. This is Cliff Reynolds signing off. Stay warm, stay awake, and never walk alone on the ice. Good night.